Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, but more specifically, we're going to discuss the Ether Bitcoin valuation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, I imagine many of you are familiar with my view on the Ether Bitcoin valuation. For those who are new, my general expectation is that the Ether Bitcoin valuation is slowly bleeding, meaning liquidity is flowing away from Ethereum and back into Bitcoin. And I would expect that trend to generally continue. Now, I do want to address a few elephants in the room. One of which is, of course, if you're a neutral party looking at the Ether Bitcoin valuation, you might say that neither bulls nor bears have really given up much ground for the last 2 years. And I would agree that that is a valid statement, right? I think both the bulls and the bears have not really given much ground. For those who are not familiar with my longer term views back in 2019, I was actually quite bullish on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. There's plenty of receipts there, but we talked about how the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation back then should generally go up. That was my expectation. Back when in fact, it's the first video you'll find on my channel. Was right here in September 2019 talking about the severe undervaluation of Ether Bitcoin. However, my views systematically shifted after we put in this high here, and then we came back down, right? We came back down, and then going into early 2022, sort of noting the lower high, recognizing that the bull market was over, of course, and just talking about the idea that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation would generally bleed at that point. I took the stance that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation should bleed, right? There's a video on it, and I got somewhat lucky because I posted a video, and the next day this plunge started. However, after that, I definitely thought that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation would have continued down from this point. I was not expecting it to sort of pop back up here. Be that as it may, I still would contend that this is still just a series of lower highs. Okay, so you still have the high from December 2021, which was not taken out even with the merge rally. Okay, and going into this, after recognizing, hey, this is going to rally back up, of course, after it had already, made about half the move, I said that, look, I don't think, I still think it'll be a lower high, right? We should fade it. And if you remember, on the date of the merge, right, the flippening narratives were everywhere, right? They were everywhere. And I said back then, look, guys, these narratives emerge all the time, right? When you see this, when you see the valuation going up, but history shows us, and not just within crypto, but in the context of other asset classes as well, that you typically do not see something like that happen, right? We would likely continue to see a systematic bleed of the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, and really since then it's just been a series of lower highs. Okay, now I know that this does not make a lot of people happy, right? I understand there's a lot of people who are very bullish on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation and would fade the idea that it's going down. Okay, I understand that. And I would love to be right there with you. I would love to be in that scenario where I could just be bullish on it. Unfortunately, I don't think I have the luxury of becoming bullish on it until I think certain conditions have been met. And at this point, I don't think those conditions have been met. And so I will continue to push with the idea that it is in a systematic bleed against Bitcoin, that Ethereum is in a bleed against Bitcoin. And the biggest counterpoint that I always see asked in the comment section is, well, didn't the deflationary aspect change things, right? Did the proof of stake change things? Okay, should that not be considered, right? My rebuttal to that is that if it was such an important thing to change the market, why didn't Ethereum flip Bitcoin back over here at the merge? And why have we just seen one lower high after another ever since? You have to ask yourself, right, these questions, right? If fundamentally something changed, then why has price action been putting in lower highs since the merge occurred? To me, what it would signify is that the market has sort of listened to those arguments and rejected them, right? And said, well, that's a great idea, but it doesn't change the fact that, we are likely to see Ethereum bleed back to Bitcoin for likely most of this year. All right. Now, I do want to, of course, address something, and that's the fact that, of course, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has been rallying for the last 4 weeks. But one of the things that I've said consistently, and even if you go back and look at the last video that we did on Ether Bitcoin, is that typically it puts in its final stand in May, right? That's what we often see, is that you'll see it do something in May, and then from there, that move gets faded for the rest of the year. Now, last year, of course, we saw it happen, right? We saw this high here occur in May, but it did not fade it for the rest of the year, right? So that aspect of it did not play out last year. We have to recognize that. We still saw it drop quite quickly going into the summer, but again, it rallied back into the merge, okay? But regardless, if you go back and look at most of the time in history, you will find, quite frequently in fact, that May will mark local tops, right? This is May right here. This is May right there as well. If you go in right here in 2019, that is May. You see a local top on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation right there. And we can continue on. I mean, you'll see the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation topped right there in May. So let's see what we have covered, right? We have 2022, we have 2021. Let's put it on here for 2020. So for 2020, you can see that it didn't, right? The Ethereum Bitcoin valuation was in an uptrend. I will point out though that I was bullish again on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation during this time frame. Go back and watch any of the videos, right, from 2019, 2020. I was very bullish on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. So yes, it was not a local top in May of 2020, although I would argue that I was bullish on it back then. It was in May of 2019. It was in May of 2018. It was in May of 2016. Let's put 2017 on the chart as well. You can see that in 2017, let me get this as accurate as I can. Where did the end of May occur on the chart here? So right here. So basically, this marked the end of May, and in that situation, it rallied for what? Like 2 more weeks. Okay, so into 2 weeks in June, and then what happened after the second week of June? It faded it until December, right? It faded it until December. And then look in 2018, right? A local top in May, and then guess what? Right? It faded it until December before seeing any type of a bounce back above the 20-week SMA. Look at it in 2016. Local top in May, faded till December. Okay? Plenty of examples. Plenty of examples where you see a local top in May, and then it gets faded until December. In this case, it faded until Q3. And it was at this point, you'll find the very first video on my channel talking about how Ethereum's Bitcoin valuation was undervalued, and it was time to turn the train around, right? Time to turn it back around and go back in the other direction. Now, admittedly, we can't just live off the calls of the past, right? Just because this was a good call does not mean that my future calls on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation are valid or accurate. This one was, right? We called for it to go down, and it did, but then this one was not. I underestimated the resilience of Ethereum in 2022. And of course, some might say that I'll underestimate it in 2023 as well. And I'm not going to say that you don't have a valid reason to think that, okay? But be that as it may, I still have to be honest to myself and go forward with the idea that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is in a systematic bleed, likely to last for potentially through September, but also it could go till December. We've seen plenty of these plenty of years where the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation sort of just fades going into the end of the year. Now, one thing to think about, how we previously showed how you'll see it fade through that December timeframe. If you look at monthly returns on the Ether Bitcoin valuation, on average, you will see that June through December, on average, is red. Now, if you add 1 standard deviation on this, it's not necessarily statistically significant to say what your average return will be, but be that as it may, again, it does show you that the first 5 months of the year on Ether Bitcoin tend to be green, on average, but the last 7 months tend to be red, on average, right? On average. You can see throughout the years, most of the last 7 months of the year typically is red, right? That's typically what we see, especially the pre-halving year. Look at 2019. 2019, the pre-halving year. Look what happened in June through December. It was just negative double-digit losses for almost every single month, right? If you give 8% to, if you just round it to 10, right? But technically correct, I guess it's not 10. There's 1 month where it went up 21%, and then the other green month, it was only a 0.5% gain. Look at the other pre-halving year, 2015, when it launched. August, September, October, November, December, all red, right? All red. So I would again still argue that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is likely to bleed going through the end of the year. So, going back to the chart here, right? If we just look pretty closely here at the chart, you'll find local tops in May almost every single year. One exception, of course, as we talked about, is 2020. We were bullish on it back then, so I feel like I can give myself a pass on that one. The other exception is 2017, where it actually rallied 2 weeks into June. So there is a potential case where you could say, all right, maybe it goes another week or two, but most of the years the rally faded once we got around to May. Even last year, right? Even last year, you can see that the rally faded in about the middle part of May or so. All right, now let's zoom in here, because the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has been rallying for 4 weeks, right? And we can see the valuation of Ether Bitcoin right now on the screen. I mean, it's 0.06818, right? About 0.06882. Earlier today, it was at 0.06847. So it's doing pretty well. Where's the bull market support band on this thing? It's around 0.06806 to 0.06812. So we're right around the 20-week SMA. We're right around that 21-week EMA. And we said a few weeks ago, going into May, that this is where it puts up its last stand, right? That's what I said. So we'll see, right? We'll see if that actually comes true or not. We'll see if it fades the rest of the year or not. We'll see if this is a lower high or not, okay? Because, I mean, I guess at some point, right, we must all question our thesis. And I continue to just go back to the idea that it's just a lower high. And, I mean, that hasn't changed yet. So until it changes, why should I question it? If it does change, maybe that would be a reason to question it. But it hasn't changed yet. And so I struggle to find the motivation to actually question the thesis, given that it's just been one lower high after another. And recently, you can see we put in a lower low as compared to say, the merge happened, we put in a low, okay? And then eventually we put in a lower low in 2023. So again, I'm in the camp that, if we sort of draw a path, right? I'm in this camp that you're going to see some type of fade here where the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation comes back down. Maybe the initial impulse will be down to that 0.058 level. Okay. So that's something I'm looking to see over the next few weeks, right? I think we'll likely see it relatively soon. Now I want to talk about why do I think that we will see it fade? Okay, more specifically. So there's two different outcomes that we should talk about for Bitcoin, right? So let's go talk about Bitcoin. And what I want to mention on this is the dominance. So if I want to mention on Bitcoin is that you have it sort of coming back into its bull market support band right now, right? It's falling back into the 20-week SMA. You can argue that we've sort of tested it a little bit. It's also been testing the 200-week moving average as well. Okay? So in the event that it holds, what would likely happen, right? In the event that it holds, what likely happens? Well, overlay the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation on here, right? Let's just take a look. New price. So we're going to look at the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. Look what happens the previous time back in March where the 20-week SMA held. The Ethereum Bitcoin valuation plummeted. It also plummeted from the 20-week SMA, right? You can see that it plummeted from its bull market support band. It was rejected by the 20-week SMA at the same time that Bitcoin USD held support. Clear as day, right? Bitcoin held support. Ether Bitcoin was rejected from its 20-week moving average, the bull market support band, or bear market resistance band, if you will. Okay? So you can see again, it was rejected. So we put forth the idea that if Bitcoin holds the line, then Ether Bitcoin valuation should likely go down, right? We've seen the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation lag Bitcoin USD anytime Bitcoin sees some type of a pump, right? You can go look at very small time frames and see that Bitcoin has moved up a few $100s just in the last couple of hours or so, right? We don't often look at like 5-minute charts, but just sort of point this out really quick. You'll see it happening on lower time frames, right? You're seeing right now, you see Bitcoin, see right here. So Bitcoin sort of had this rally right here, and then you can see that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation fell back in, right, down to 0.068. And not too long ago, it was at 0.64. Again, I mean, you're going to see fluctuations all the time. And by the time we get to the end of this video, the valuation could be back at 0.0684. But the point is that if we see Bitcoin hold the line at the 20-week SMA, then I would expect, not financial advice, right? I would expect Ether to get rejected by its 20-week SMA, just like it did in March, right? Just like it did in March. That's what I would expect anyways. Okay, so rejection in March when Bitcoin held the line. If Bitcoin holds the line again, I would say rejection in May or June, right? Whenever it actually happens. Okay, that's what I would say. So that's scenario one. What's scenario two? Well, I'm glad you asked. Scenario two is Bitcoin doesn't hold the line and it falls below the bull market support band. Okay, so what happened in that case? What happens in this case? Well, you'll notice that in 2019, once Bitcoin once the high was in, right? Once the high was in, you'll see that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation slowly faded, right? You'll see that it slowly faded, and then it hit a low, right? It hit a low, and then it sort of ranged on the bottom until what? Like the end of the year? We didn't really go anywhere, okay? So that would be, in my opinion, that would be the best case scenario, is that it would just go sideways, right? But if we look closer at the data, what I want to focus on is from this point, right, from 20-week SMA close below, Bitcoin USD close below the 20-week SMA until close back above, right, what happened to Ether Bitcoin during that time? Okay, we talked about this in a video not too long ago, but I want to talk about it again right now because there's actually a whole table that we can look at. Okay, so throughout history, there's a lot of examples where Bitcoin USD goes above its 20-week SMA or below its 20-week SMA. And what we're interested in is when it goes above it and has a weekly close above it, what outperforms from that point until Bitcoin USD has a weekly close below it, right? What outperforms? Is it Ether or is it Bitcoin? Let's go take a look. Okay, so you'll see here, and let me zoom in here so it's not as, hopefully you can see the screen pretty well. Let me move my, let me move my feed there. All right, so what you'll see is, I guess I need to zoom out a little bit. What you'll see is that 9 out of 9 times when Bitcoin closed below the 20-week SMA until it closed back above it, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation bled. 9 out of 9 times. So if Bitcoin holds the line at the 20-week, I would expect Ether Bitcoin's valuation to go down, right? If it holds the line, because that's what happened in March. And I mean, if you know me, right, I got the dominance hat on, right? I think the dominance of Bitcoin is going higher. We've seen this correlation happen throughout the entire year so far, so why should it stop now? If Bitcoin breaks to the upside, Ether Bitcoin should go down. If Bitcoin breaks to the downside and goes below the 20-week SMA, then throughout all of history, since Ethereum has been around, 9 out of 9 times, the Ether Bitcoin valuation went down from the point when Bitcoin had a weekly close below its 20-week SMA until it crossed back above it, however long that was. There has not been a single time in history, I believe, unless, I mean, there's some that are sort of equal, but statistically, I mean, a major difference, right? 9 out of 9 times, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has more or less bled or stayed about flat when Bitcoin USD went below its 20-week SMA. You never really saw a big increase on Ether Bitcoin during the time that Bitcoin USD dropped below the 20-week until it went back above. During that period. Of course, any point during that period, you can cherry pick and find places where it only went down or it only went up or it only went sideways. But throughout the entire period, measured from weekly close below the 20-week to weekly close above by Bitcoin, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation always bled. And when Bitcoin was above its 20-week SMA, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has always gone up, except for one time, right? Because you might say, well, Bitcoin's above the 20-week SMA right now, right? So history shows us that normally the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation outperforms when Bitcoin USD is above its 20-week SMA, right? From weekly close above the 20-week to weekly close below, not initially. I mean, right initially, you might see Bitcoin outperform, but from weekly close above to weekly close below, Ether Bitcoin tends to outperform, except for one time. One time. And that was in 2019. More specifically, from March of 2019 until September. So we had March, so you have about 6 months, right? It was about a 6-month window where Bitcoin USD was above the 20-week, but guess what? Ether Bitcoin fell during that time, right? It went down. You can see that Bitcoin went up 106%. Ether only went up 29%. Ergo, Ether Bitcoin went down, even though Bitcoin USD was above the 20-week SMA, right? So it's the pre-halving year, just like 2019. If Bitcoin holds the line at the 20-week, which there's a chance that it does, right? There's always a chance that it does. If it holds the line, then the expectation, in my mind, is that Ether Bitcoin should go down. If it doesn't hold the line, and the reason I say that is because it's the pre-halving year. This is the time that the correlation of Ether Bitcoin going up when Bitcoin USD was above it failed, right? So I would assume it would probably fail again, pretty similar conditions, right? Additionally, we've already seen this correlation play out for the last several months. So I would think that trend would continue. So if Bitcoin holds the line, I think Ether Bitcoin goes down. If Bitcoin does not hold the line, I think Ether Bitcoin goes down. Again, 9 out of 9 times it has when Bitcoin did not hold the line. 9 out of 9 times. I mean, look, there's a first time for everything, right? But this table, we've been following this since we've been updating this table since 2019, I believe. And this has been going on for years, and it continues to more or less work. Okay, so going back. The idea, as I've stated, is that if Bitcoin holds the line, Ether Bitcoin likely goes down. If Bitcoin does not hold the line, Ether Bitcoin likely goes down. It's the pre-halving year. This is just the way it normally works in the pre-halving year. Here you can see that this rally by Bitcoin USD back over here, again, it started in March. It was March through September. Let's look at monthly candles. So it was 3 months up and then fade till September. And the Ether Bitcoin valuation went down during that time, right? After we crossed it, right? So we had March got us sort of above the 20-week, right? So March got us above it, and then we had April, May, and June. Here, January got us above it, right? And then we had February, March, and April. Is this where it starts to fade, right? Like it did in 2019? It could be. I mean, this could be where Bitcoin USD starts to fade. I mean, it had 3 months after clearing the 20-week SMA. The biggest counterpoint, of course, is that, well, back then we had 3 distinct rallies. Back in 2019, right? We had 1, 2, and 3. This time we've only had 2. So there's a chance that you could see Bitcoin push higher. I've contended for a long time that if Bitcoin is going to push higher this year, I would expect it to happen in the first half of the year, right? So by June, sometime in June is when I would expect Bitcoin USD to push higher if it's going to, right? If it's not going to, then so be it, right? If it wants to fade here, it can fade. But if it's going to push higher, I think it happens in June, not 5 months from now. I think it happens in June, because I mean, from a time-based perspective, normally we in the pre-halving years, we see a rally and then it gets faded at some point in that pre-halving year. Over here in 2015, we sort of had 2 rallies during the pre-halving year, and then both of them were ultimately faded. So if this is going to mimic 2019, then again, I mean, maybe you have until June, and that would mean that you get one push higher. But in that scenario, if Bitcoin gets another push higher, up to say like 35K or something, which would be the time average year-to-date ROI from 2015 to 2019, if it pushes higher, then Ether Bitcoin likely goes down because it just simply, I don't think it will be able to keep pace with Bitcoin. It hasn't kept pace this year. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but I mean, again, Ether Bitcoin has been going down. Take a look at where Bitcoin USD crossed the 20-week SMA in 2023. Crossed it in January, the week of January 9th. Okay, now I know a lot of people might think that Ethereum's only been bullish on Bitcoin's pair this year, right? You might think that, but if you go back to January 9th and look to see where Ether Bitcoin was on the week of January 9th, it opened on the week of January 9th at 0.075. Okay, so you can't really tell me that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has been bullish this year. I mean, since Bitcoin broke above the 20-week SMA back in January, it's just been down for Ether Bitcoin. I mean, it's still down 10%, even with this most recent rally. Okay, and a month ago when we put out an Ether Bitcoin valuation video, we said, look, guys, May on average tends to be green, right? I mean, on average, literally every single May throughout all of history for Ether Bitcoin has been green except for one, and that was last year. Every single one. On average, it tends to give 19% returns, but within one standard, or to plus or minus 26.6%, right? One standard deviation, so it's pretty high. But still, I mean, May tends to be green. June tends to not be. July tends to not be. August, September, October, November, December, they tend to not be on average. I would expect, if this is going to play out, then you have 7 more months. I would say there's a good chance 4 or 5 of them are red for the Ether Bitcoin valuation. 4 or 5 of them from here until the end of the year. Okay? That's what I would suspect. So I mean, we've covered the idea, right? I mean, Ether Bitcoin, has it rallied in May? Yes, it has. So what? It normally does. We said it's probably going, it's going to be the last stand. So what it normally does. One example where it went till June, mid-June, back in 2017. So keep that in mind. Like if it doesn't fall in the next couple of weeks, it still could mark a local top in the very early part of June. Most of the time it occurs in May. So if Bitcoin holds the line, Ether Bitcoin falls. If Bitcoin does not hold the line, I would expect Ether Bitcoin to fall. 9 out of 9 times it has, right? So, and then of course the other idea is just sort of going back to this dominance idea, the Bitcoin dominance, and saying, look, I mean, I think, in my opinion, we need to break this 49% level. We've talked about this for a long time, and back over here we broke it on a rally by Bitcoin USD, and it wasn't until after it broke that Bitcoin USD saw any type of sustained correction, right? After the prior range high of the dominance broke. Until that point, Bitcoin stayed strong on its USD pair, right? If you don't like me comparing it to 2018, again, so what? I mean, I'll compare it to 2019. I mean, even here, if you look at this range high from September 2018, you can see that once Bitcoin broke it in June, right? Remember, Bitcoin broke this range high here in June. Guess what? It happened on a rally, right? Overlay Bitcoin USD onto this chart. Look at this. What marked the high for Bitcoin USD? It was when it broke the range high on the dominance. When the dominance broke the range high, it marked the end of the rally. In 2018, it was once Bitcoin dominance broke this range high, right, in 2018, right here in July, that's what marked the end of the rally. Once the dominance broke, once the altcoin market broke off support from their Bitcoin pairs, Bitcoin stayed strong until then. So I'm saying again that I think the dominance needs to get to 49%. And sustain it. A lot of people have given me a hard time about my views on Bitcoin dominance. A lot of people, and they've said plenty of things. But look, what do I see? I see a massive move by the dominance higher. I see it consolidating up here. This just looks like some type of consolidation pattern for it to ultimately move up again. And I don't even know that it has to wait for the 20-week SMA to catch up. Another way to look at it is to look at the 100-day, which it also held support on. I mean, you could look at the bull market support pattern and say, well, it held support here, it held support here, maybe it has to hold support again. But another way to look at it is look at the 100-day and say, well, the 100-day also held support here and then here. Maybe it's the 100-day that needs to just catch up. And it's already approaching 47%. A more aggressive moving average, which it also coincidentally held support on, is the 10-week. Support in January, support in March, maybe support in May. And if Bitcoin dominance can get above 49%, then I think it collectively breaks the back of the altcoin market, right? So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the dominance to get above 49%. Once it does, I think we will systematically see the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation bleed, even if Bitcoin corrects, right? So imagine a world where Bitcoin rallies and the dominance goes above 49%, and then Bitcoin corrects. Up until now, a lot of times when Bitcoin goes down on its USD pair, you'll see the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation go up. You've seen that a lot this year, right? On those short-term corrections, Ether Bitcoin goes up. But Bitcoin USD has been above its 20-week SMA. If Bitcoin were to go below the 20-week SMA, say in a month or two or something, then you could see the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation go down even on Bitcoin USD dumps. Once the dominance is above, right, you said it, 49%. Okay, so I'll continue to hammer this point home until either it happens or I'm proven wrong. And I know some people think that it's already been proven wrong, but I would still say, I mean, look, to me, this just looks like one lower or one higher low after another for Bitcoin dominance. And for Ether Bitcoin, it just looks like one lower high after another. Right? Just one lower high after another. Every time we get a lower high, everyone screams from the rooftops that this is it and the flippening's finally here. You fast forward a few more weeks and you just look back and guess what? It's just another lower high. Okay? So, you know, we've talked about this forever. One reason, by the way, for the if you want an explanation for it, not that I feel like I have to give one. The only reason I would give one here is I mean, I guess some level it's just rationalization, right? I mean, you know, it's taken a lot longer than I thought. One reason that it might be taking so much longer, right, instead of just going down as quickly as it did back over here, is just because there's so much more liquidity in the system today than there was, you know, back in 2018 and 2019. That's one thought, right? There's just so much more liquidity in the game, and it's just taking a lot longer for the Federal Reserve to remove that liquidity. But the liquidity is being removed, okay? And by the way, I mean, with the debt ceiling stuff going on, I believe they came to at least sort of a handshake agreement. We'll see if it passes. But if that actually passes, then the TGA has to get refilled. And I mean, I would expect that would actually remove liquidity from the system, right? Because recently it's been being drawn down on, and liquidity has been, you know, the liquidity drain from the Fed has been sort of offset by the drawdown in the TGA. But now that the debt ceiling is theoretically passed, then you could see that be a sort of a double whammy on QT, because then you have the Fed draining liquidity, and you have the TGA being refilled, which also then drains liquidity theoretically, and so on and so forth. So to me, right, I just think it's a lower high. And I know these views don't make me any friends. I get it. You know, I really do. It's kind of funny because, you know, I remember being that person a long time ago, sort of laughing, like laughing at people that held a bearish view on a cryptocurrency that I held, or an altcoin that I held, on their Bitcoin pairs, because I was very bullish on their Bitcoin pairs and saying, well, all these altcoins are always going to outperform Bitcoin, but they don't, and it's a hard lesson to learn. You know, I mean, look, is there a chance I'm wrong on Ether Bitcoin? Yeah, wouldn't be the first thing I'm wrong on. And you guys know that. It would not be the first thing I'm wrong on if the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation breaks up. Like if it does something like this and breaks to the upside, then I will admit it. I will say, all right, well, you know, it was wrong. But until that time, all I see are lower highs. All I see is Bitcoin continuing to outperform Ethereum during this calendar year. I look at the pre-halving year and I say, hey, in the pre-halving year, normally Ethereum Bitcoin valuation bleeds. In when the dominance is as low as it is, normally the Bitcoin continues to sort of just crush everything else, including Ethereum. I mean, look, I'll give it to the ETH maxis, right? I mean, like Ethereum's been crushing a lot of the altcoins. A lot of the altcoins are down on their Ether pairs as well. We know that, right? I mean, go look at a lot of the altcoins. I mean, let's just take a look, right? Go look at ADA ETH. I mean, I don't talk about a lot of the altcoins as much in the public channel now because I just think they're bleeding against the blue chips. Look at ADA ETH. I mean, it's just been a downtrend for a long time. Look at Aave ETH, right? I mean, look at this. These things are just bleeding. Look at AVAX ETH. I mean, just systematic bleed. BNB ETH, maybe not as bad, right? But it still has been bleeding since the end of into 2022. Link ETH, it looks awful. Bleeding forever. You might say, well, maybe it's a double bottom. Maybe you're right, but if you look at, say, like Aave Bitcoin, it wasn't really a double bottom. It just put in a new low. If you look at, Theta Bitcoin, you might have said, well, it's a double bottom. Guess what? It wasn't. It just put in a new low. Maker Bitcoin, right? It's coming into that. It's coming into that level. I think a lot of people look at these and say, well, it's going to be a bottom, double bottom, but a lot of these are just put in new lows. So look, at the end of the day, the altcoin market has been bleeding to Ethereum, right? But also throughout this year, Ether has been bleeding to Bitcoin. I mean, look at 12-month candles, if you don't believe me, right? It's there, right? It's not a lot, right? But it's still there. Ether Bitcoin is down 5.77% this year, 5.79. Okay, so it is down. You might say, well, that's not a whole lot. I would agree it's not a whole lot. It's not as much as I thought it would be at this point. Completely agree with you, right? Completely agree with that statement. But still, technically, the idea of it bleeding is not wrong. I mean, it'd be like if I'd taken the other stance and said that it goes up during this year. That would have been wrong. And of course, people would have acknowledged that as being wrong. So it is still technically going down. And until it shows any other signal here, I mean, I'm going to assume it will continue to go down. Look at the last years, like 2018, 2019. The 2019 year for Ether Bitcoin was worse than 2018. 2018, you can see that the candle, I mean, there was some crazy wicks, but right, just the candle was down 34%. 2019, it was down 49%. So I think there's a compelling reason, again, to think that the Ether Bitcoin valuation is going down. And then another way to look at this, if I haven't given you enough reasons, maybe I'm trying to convince myself at this point, not you. But if we were to look at the Heikin-Ashi candles for the Ether Bitcoin valuation, let's go to monthly. So we talked about this as well, right? You have sort of your impulsive move here, A. Impulsive move here, A. And then your move to get you to your peak on the Ether Bitcoin, which is B. Same thing here, which is B. And then a lower high, C. Lower high here, C. And then after C comes sort of just a slow fade. This slow fade sort of really kicked off in July. Again, slow fade. To me, though, it looks like we need this part. So it looks like to me. Now, if you don't like what I'm saying, I understand. And I will say that I am sort of still in the camp that, while I will say, and again, let me just say it right. So you have lower highs, right? You have a lower high here. We have all sorts of lower highs in here. We looked at it on the weekly chart. You also have a lower high here. I mean, like, these are lower highs, guys. I mean, everyone talks about the flippening, but they don't mention the fact that Ether's Bitcoin valuation has been putting lower highs in since 2017. Since May of 2017. Since June of 2017. Since June of 2017, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation has been putting in lower highs. That is a valid statement, is it not? It has not taken out this level. It has not taken out this level. This high in 2021 was lower than the 2018 high, and the high in 2022 was lower than the 2021 high, which was lower than the 2018 high and lower than the 2017 high. So I would say the 2023 high is probably going to be lower than the 2022 high, and so on and so forth. And then what happens if you come back, if you actually see the sell-off, right? If it comes back down here. Does it have to go back down to 0.016 like it did last cycle? I don't necessarily think so. Again, I've said this before. I think you could make the case that it's also putting in higher lows, right? And maybe it's on a logarithmic regression curve itself, like Bitcoin USD. Maybe it's just putting in higher lows. So it comes back down and then it pops back up, and then we figure out what matters more. What matters more? Is it the lower highs or is it the higher lows? I don't know at this point, but I still do feel compelled to think that whether it's whether Ether's Bitcoin valuation puts in, whether the higher lows is more important or the lower highs, I still think we go down before we figure that out. I still think we go down before we figure that out. And we'll see. I mean, look, guys, it's been a long time coming. I know a lot of people are tired of these, these Ether Bitcoin valuation videos, primarily because, I mean, in reality, it hasn't really moved a whole lot in 2 years. Okay, I mean, that's the truth. So, I mean, no matter how strong the bulls have had their opinion, no matter how strong the bears have had their opinion, the reality check for both sides is that it hasn't really moved in 2 years. Okay, so I would honestly say that until this high is taken out, or this low is taken out, neither side has really gained any ground. I mean, we're literally right in the middle of the range right now. So we need to see some reconciliation of this at some point so that at least one side knows that they're right, right? There's a lot of people that are right, and there's a lot of people that are wrong, and we will find out who that is. Maybe it's me, right? I don't know, but we will find that out. Anyways, we've been going on long enough. We've talked enough about this. Again, just to summarize, if Bitcoin holds the line, I think Ether Bitcoin goes down. If Bitcoin falls below the 20-week, I think Ether Bitcoin valuation goes down. Historically, during the pre-halving year, the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation goes down. Liquidity is still being sucked out of the system, which I think would make it go towards the higher market cap plays. We've seen this in the tech stocks as well, right? The blue chip mega cap stuff has been going up the most. I think it's a flight to relative safety. And from the altcoin market, Ethereum has been relative safety, as we showed. Right? A lot of altcoins are bleeding against Ethereum, and they have been for a long time. But at the end of the day, Ether is bleeding back to Bitcoin. And so, with that in mind, I think that Bitcoin remains the safer play. And I think the dominance of Bitcoin is continuing its journey to break that 49% level and begin a rapid ascent, potentially to 60%. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.